As the war drew to a close, Mann and Overton and Austin got together to design a new model. Austin could build the chassis, but didn't have the capacity in its factories to build the body. Pre-war cabs had been coach-built, but this was now too expensive a method to use, so the new cab had to have an all-steel body. This was expensive to make in the small numbers required, but Austin had an answer. During World War II, Austin built military aircraft and had subcontracted the Coventry coach builder car bodies to make some of the fuselage parts using a new American material, Kirksite, for the press tools. Austin introduced Mann and Overton's Robert Overton to car bodies managing director Ernest Jones. A deal was struck between the men where Austin would build the chassis, car bodies would build a steel body using Kirksite tools, mount it onto the chassis and send it to Mann and Overton's in London to sell. Mann and Overton would pay half the cost, with Austin and car bodies splitting the remaining half between them. The new cab was advertised as the Austin Metropolitan Taxi, but it was better known by its works model number, the FX3. It had pre-war styling because the design had been laid out in the mid-1940s, before modern styles began to appear. There was, though, one big difference between it and the cabs that came before it. The Public Carriage Office had introduced a new rule banning the use of the traditional landaulet roof. Now the cab's roof will be solid steel and big glass windows replaced the leather hood. It was introduced at the 1948 London Commercial Motor Show alongside another make of cab, the Nuffield Oxford, which had already been in service for a year. The FX3 proved the more reliable of the two and sold far better. By the time it was due for replacement in 1959, around 700 had been built by car bodies. This is an LTI fairway driver. It was the last model ever made of the FX4, of a series of vehicles that went back to 1959, can you believe? And although they all looked from the outside the same, there were several different models. There were Austins, and there were car bodies, and there were LTI models, all different engines, all with different mechanical configurations, but all the same look. Now, why did they stay the same? Basically, it was about money. When this vehicle got to 10 years old, it was time for a replacement. But Mann and Overton, the people that commissioned it, could not afford the kind of prices that car bodies, the people that were making it, wanted to charge them. So they said, no, just do a facelift, do a few little changes, and we'll carry on with it for a few years. But then we ran into the kind of troublesome years of the British motor industry. Nobody was making any money, the industry was falling apart, and nobody had the money to build a new London taxi. Why was that? Partly because the cost of building cars was so great, it had gone up by leaps and bounds, and the market for taxis was very, very small compared to what it is for, say, an ordinary family car. So they kept it going for a little while longer. They tried a couple of new models, an FX5, it didn't work, CR6 based on a Range Rover, it didn't work. And when they decided to scrap the Range Rover, they said, okay, we have to accept the reality that this vehicle is going to go on for a few more years. And in fact, that triggered a change in the way the vehicle looked, because the CR6 was going to be modern, the FX5 was going to be modern, but this is a piece of history. Let's take a look at the outside of it. It's a traditional look. The old single headlamps, a big square grille, compared to the cars that were about in the 70s, it's old-fashioned. But that continuity has made it famous. It's one of the most recognisable vehicles in the world. But you see this coming down the road, it's not just that light on the roof you see, it's that shape that makes you say, taxi, I know what it is. I know what I'm going to get into. I know I'm going to be safe. And that's what the makers, car bodies or London Taxis International have become, traded on. They said, this is an iconic vehicle. You look at this shape, old-fashioned, yes, traditional, yes, but it's one of the most famous and most recognisable motor vehicles in the world.